grid of sewage, yes.
Yeah.
Put together by people who don't want the Prime Minister to be in power anymore, don't want him in that in number 10, and they are trying to derail him. And by blocking him from doing anything in Parliament, so by blocking this bill progressing, by making it difficult for him, they are making his life impossible, and he can't do anything. And I think the hope is that would trigger a leadership battle.
I don't want to give away all of your secrets, but you're having problems with your outfit because the Palace of Westminster is so cold.
It's cold and drafty, so I have on 3 layers and my thermals, but then it's very hot in here, so now I'm too hot.
Do you think, and obviously we will get to the politics of the day imminently, but do you think it's possible that in your lifetime the House of Commons and the House of Lords might be somewhere outside Leighton Buzzard instead of in that beautiful, cold, rat-infested building by the Thames?
They've been discussing it since I started, which was now over a decade ago, and they keep putting off this decision because it will require MPs to vote for a plan which will cost all of us taxpayers billions of pounds. But I can't tell you, it's really bad. I mean, it's still got a Victorian sewage system, so the toilets regularly do not work above level 1 of the building. There are thousands of people working in a place that was never meant to be a workplace. It's got fire officers working 24 hours a day because they don't actually have adequate fire prevention methods. I mean, it's a building stuffed full of carpets, curtains, and paper. If it goes up, it goes up. There's no stopping it.
Yeah, it is extraordinary, isn't it? Because the bits that the public see just don't tell us all of that. And that rabbit warren of corridors and the fact that there are, 6 MPs sharing an office, there's a printer 17 miles away.
They've got cables in the basement, which they don't know what the cables are for, because they've just got miles and miles of electrical cables, pipeworks, all crisscrossing each other, and they've got no idea what they do. Nobody does.
Gosh, it would be tempting to cut them and see what happens.
The entrance to the press gallery was blocked off recently because of falling masonry. It wasn't safe to actually enter the press gallery through the normal route.
Gosh, this is a metaphor for something, Kate. I can't think what it is. Right, shall we talk about the Rwanda bill?
Yes.
Rishi Sunak's policy of sending migrants to Rwanda faces further delays. I mean, I feel like we've read this particular queue several times before. The Prime Minister has insisted that flights to Kigali will take off by the end of May, but all of this is being stymied by the House of Lords. I mean, it is just such a tug of war, isn't it? Applying all of your political acumen to the situation, Kate. What will happen? We just carry on reporting this endless delay that takes us to June, possibly beyond?
So I don't expect there will be an endless delay. So we are in ping pong, which is quite a sort of strange situation where it's going back to the House of Lords and all the amendments will go back into the bill probably, or most of them will go back into the bill, and then it will come back to the House of Commons and they'll get taken out again. Usually, as you heard Charlie Faulkner saying there, when it gets to a certain stage, the Lords stop doing this because they recognise that Parliament has spoken, they've had a go, they've asked Parliament to reconsider a number of times, and it has done that. What's actually interesting about this situation, though, is that the government has not given or not added extra time to consider the Rwanda bill before Easter in the Commons at the moment. So in the Lords, if it gets those amendments put back in, it can't come back to the Commons before the Easter recess. So government is telling you, the Prime Minister is telling you, we're doing everything we can to push this as fast as we can, but they're not, because they could have given extra time to consider it, and they haven't done that. And that led a couple of journalists this morning to question that during the Prime Minister's briefing with journalists, Prime Minister Spokesman's briefing. And I wonder whether it actually has more to do with the fact that it would be quite helpful for the government to see this legislation delayed a little bit longer and come in just before the May elections, at least the first flight just before the May elections.
Right. But what do you think that photo opportunity will be like? I mean, let's say that it does happen, and I think, is it 150 people who have been identified as...
That's the hope, yeah.
...being able to get on board that flight because they are least likely to be able to have a successful appeal anywhere.
That's the government's hope.
Yep. So you get that photo opportunity. Do you think that that really does say some kind of victory to the greater public about the government? Doesn't 150 people getting on a plane actually look rather pathetic?
I think it says, given that most people now understand that this has gone on through a number of different processes, including legal ones, that getting a flight off the ground at all is some level of success for the policy. There was never a number, although the scheme is uncapped, there was never a set number, so we were never told we're going to send 20,000 people to Rwanda. In fact, I think it's probably unlikely it would ever be as high as that. But for the government, this is symbolic. It's about saying we've promised to stop the boats. This is a major part of that policy. It's a deterrent policy. Now, we can argue about whether we think it will work or not, but being able to prove that you've done it is just as important for the Prime Minister as it actually working in practice.
I do worry about the optics, though. I can just see it being one of those occasions where everyone stands around and really, really picks holes in what is happening rather than hangs out the bunting for what has been achieved.
I think if you're a certain, I mean, this policy is designed to appeal to people who care very deeply about immigration. And when you look at polling across the country, there are a lot of people who feel that they don't like the idea that people can skip the queue, that they can come into the UK without a check, that they can just immediately be given asylum. They don't like that. So anything that's going to try and deal with that issue is seen as a good thing by, lots of different people. For many, they will applaud this plan. They will think, well, you have no right to be here. You are going to go to Rwanda, and that's going to stop other people. For other people seeing it, they will think it's not the kind of country I want to live in. It was always going to divide opinion, but it will be what some people want the government to be doing.
Now, tell us about what lies behind the prison sentences revolt.
I know this doesn't sound particularly exciting. I can see your faces.
No,
you don't look excited by it.
I am prepared to be excited.
Look, this is a story that the sentencing bill, which actually has some really important measures in it, for example, making rapists serve their entire term in prison. That's something that everybody would want to see happen. But it hasn't actually made its way onto the statute book. It's not law yet. And it's being held up because there are quite a big group of Tory MPs who want to change the bill. They want to toughen it up. The bit that they don't like is the idea that if you are sentenced to under 12 months in prison, you shouldn't be sent to prison. You should be out on a tag, because it's just stuffing our prisons full of people who they're not going to be rehabilitated. They're just going to be in there taking up space. Now, we know the Justice Secretary has had to already say he's going to release people early. Didn't want to do that. He wants to pass this bill and he can't. Why is that? I think, and well, speaking to people in Westminster, this is actually part of a plan to try and derail the Prime Minister. It's part of this plot, and I can't say the word I would like to say, but it's a grid of stuff.
Yeah.
A grid of bad stuff, which has been
We are
put
talking
together.
about sewage just before 5 o'clock.
A grid of sewage, yes.
Yeah.
Put together by people who don't want the Prime Minister to be in power anymore, don't want him in that in number 10, and they are trying to derail him. And by blocking him from doing anything in Parliament, so by blocking this bill progressing, by making it difficult for him, they are making his life impossible, and he can't do anything. And I think the hope is that would trigger a leadership battle.
So given that there might be, as you said, a grid of what's it, does that mean that everything gets stuck in the grid of what's it?
It certainly means that you could see problems, for example, with the smoking legislation, and part of the reason for that is that there are some Tory MPs who don't like it and say, well, it wasn't in the manifesto, so you don't have a right to do it, and therefore we don't want to vote for it, we don't want to help you get it through. And there are other things too. I mean, abortion is another one. Abortion is always a free vote, but it's a difficulty for
This is about the plan to decriminalise abortion.
Yes, yeah. And although we don't quite know what that's going to look like yet, but it's just I think the sense that this group want to give is that Parliament isn't working, the government isn't working. And if the Prime Minister gets to a point where he can't pass legislation, that's almost endgame, because if you are the Prime Minister and you can't get your troops behind you to do what you're asking them to do.
That was the point that Theresa May got to that point, didn't she, with Brexit?
Exactly. And that's usually the moment when Prime Ministers have to look at themselves and say, this isn't working, we need to do something about it. And the theory is that if the Prime Minister gets to that point, he may have to trigger an election early.
Do you think that Rishi Sunak wants the smoking thing to be his legacy?
I think he definitely thinks it's important. Yeah, he wants a policy that is going to stand up in years to come. A bit like when we talked about the smoking policy, we talk about seatbelts, introducing seatbelt legislation. It's something that we can't imagine not having now, but at the time was very controversial. And it takes somebody who wants to push that through to make it happen.
Yeah.
And there is opposition to the smoking legislation. Some people say it doesn't make sense. Others say it's been tried in New Zealand and they've withdrawn it because it doesn't work. So,
would you like an opportunity to hear a little bit more from Jacob Rees-Mogg today?
Oh, Fee, yes, please.
The former business secretary spoke to Times Radio Breakfast earlier.
Well, I think Rishi Sunak is an honest, decent and intelligent man who is doing the job effectively, but times at the moment seem to be against him. But to what extent can things change? To what extent is any improvement in the economy going to be beneficial? And to what extent will people look at Keir Starmer and say, well, that's not exactly who we want?
My greyhound has very, very sad eyes, and it doesn't matter how happy she is, she always looks sad. And I think about that when Jacob Rees-Mogg speaks. It doesn't really matter what it is he says. He just sounds very despondent.
I don't know what to say.
Because he was
to that.
batting for the Prime Minister.
Well,
there.
officially he was, although I'm beginning to
tone.
wonder.
The tone.
I think the tone is something really important, and it's actually worth picking up on here, because imagine, let's just for a moment, we're obviously very cynical, we're all journalists, but let's for a moment imagine that you were part of an organisation that you knew was not going to exist for very much longer, and you were sent out every single day to say the exact opposite. It would at some point become quite difficult to do that. And you are sensing now this tone from people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and others of resignation, which is that, we know it's very hard. I don't think I've found anybody who will honestly tell me that they think the Tories are going to win the next election, a Conservative. Some people will say it's an uphill struggle, we could still do it, it might be difficult, but there's a chance. But nobody is going around saying it's going to be easy or they're going to win it.
I did see Penny Mordaunt being pursued by reporters as she left home this morning. But we were talking yesterday to Henry Hill from Conservative Home, who said that she's basically the face of a campaign that she doesn't want to be the face of. She's being forced out there, isn't she? Is that the gist of it?
To an extent.
Yeah.
I think she probably would quite like to be the next
after
leader
the
of the
election.
party.
Yeah.
But it's not helpful to her to be in the papers touted as somebody who could be the next leader right now, because she doesn't have a campaign team together, and really the people who are pushing her name forward are trying to destabilise the Prime Minister, and they're using her as a way to do that. So
My mum calls it the face powder plot.
the face powder plot.
Yeah, Penny Mordaunt's face powder plot.
Interesting.
Yes, I know. Well, that's what happens when you're 83.
Well, every plot has to be called something. You are quite right. But I think all this chatter about a leadership contest, it's when you actually get sort of underneath the surface, there is a group of people who are really agitating to make this happen. But there is a much bigger group of Tory MPs who are fed up. They don't see the point in it. They want to get on. Many of them are leaving their seats. The ones who are not leaving already are going to probably lose their seats, and they know it. And so it's not a great.
It's not a happy ship, is
It's
it?
not a great mood down there at the minute. No.
Kate, thank you very much. Wrap up warm. We'll talk again.
Quick question from a listener, actually, and I think I know the answer to this. Will those Rwanda passengers be paid? Asks a texter. This is
No, it's a different policy.
It's
different policy. Well, technically, we are paying for them. Taxpayers are paying for
But they're
them.
not
and
getting
there
this
is
£3,000.
No, they won't be paid directly. That's a different scheme where people will be able to essentially sign up to go, and they'll be paid £3,000. But we will be paying far, far more than that as taxpayers for each individual sent to Rwanda. There was an estimate of £230,000 per person over the weekend, although the government hasn't confirmed that.